Have you ever wanted to meet yourself? Have you ever wanted to meet your doppelganger, the other version of yourself in the flesh, perhaps? I know I have. Hi, I'm Emery Ricks, and today we're going to be talking about what to do when you meet your doppelganger, is what I was going to say. Anyways. Today we're going to talk about Mickey 17 and Mickey 7. So now you're like, what the hell is Mickey 7? This is Mickey 7. Mickey 17, for those of you who don't know, it's a sci-fi movie that just recently came out that follows this guy named Mickey. Alright, now, I have a point to make. Let me read you the logline for Mickey 17. From trusted source IMDb. Mickey 17, known as an expendable, goes on a dangerous journey to colonize an ice planet. I hope you're hungry for nothing. Now let me read you the blurb from the back of Mickey 7, okay? On a routine scouting mission, Mickey 7 goes missing and is presumed dead. By the time he returns to the colony base, his fate has been sealed. There's a new clone, Mickey 8, reporting for expendable duties. The idea of duplicate expendables is universally loathed, and, if caught, they face being recycled into protein to feed a hungry colony. Meanwhile, life on Niflheim is getting worse, and the native species are growing curious about their new neighbors, which has Commander Marshall very afraid. Ultimately, the survival of both life forms will come down to Mickey 7. Are you catching my drift? When I watched Mickey 17, after reading this a few months prior, I was excited, and by the end of the movie, I was disappointed severely. I don't know a lot of people who have also read the book. Most of the people that I know that have seen the movie are just going off that. I'm the only person I know in real life that has also read the book. That's to say, everyone else that has read the book, I don't know personally, okay? Most of my complaints about the movie stem from changes that they made when adapting the source material, which is what I want to talk about today. What is the purpose of changing things from the book into the movie? That doesn't make sense. I'm going to do a deep dive into both Mickey 17 and Mickey 7 in order to compare the two. Before I get into things, I want to say this is all personal opinion. If you liked the movie, that's great. All of my opinions are subjective, and that's that. But there's really not much else to say. The way that this video is going to work is I am going to talk... Sorry. I'm going to talk about the movie in its entirety, and then we're going to shift and talk about the book in its entirety, and then we'll kind of have a little comparison analysis session, okay? The reason I'm doing it like this is because if I were to kind of just go in a linear fashion and compare them side by side, it would get a little lost, I fear. There are very similar beats, but the execution is wildly different. And so we would start here, okay, this is the line that we're starting, this is the timeline, everything is the same. And basically, immediately we kind of diverge, and it just kind of grows. Does this visual make sense? My point is that they get so far apart that I don't think comparing them in a linear fashion would work necessarily. Without further ado, let's get into Mickey 17.
I don't like you. You're such a little bitch. But I'm you.
So, Mickey 17 is a movie that just came out in 2025, The Lord of Our Year and Savior. It was supposed to be a joke, and then I just really f***ed it up. The Year of Our Lord and Savior is what I was gonna say. Which is a joke, because the Lord doesn't exist. Sorry, that was also a joke. Mickey 17 is directed by Bong Joon-ho, who is the director of Parasite. It stars Robert Pattinson, Steven Yeun is in it. You also have, frickin', what's his face? Mark Ruffalo. Oh, Naomi Ackie. I hope that's how you pronounce it. She's also very important, so I'm gonna name drop her as well. If you are watching this right now and you haven't seen Mickey 17 for whatever reason, and you want to, don't look anything up about it. Don't watch the rest of this video. Just go in blind, because I think that will help your viewing experience. We'll get more into the trailer talk a little bit later, but for right now, we'll get into the movie. On my second viewing of Mickey 17, in which I took all of these notes, I wanted to focus on a few things I wanted to see if it was more enjoyable as a movie, since the first time I was kind of constantly comparing things to the book in my head. I also wanted to know if it felt longer. There were a couple other things regarding pacing that I wanted to look at, and the timing of certain things. But first, let's watch Mickey 17 through my mouth. This is gonna be a long video. Mickey 17 opens on Mickey 17, and he's fallen down a hole, okay? He's at the bottom of this cave, he's hurt, he's still alive, okay? This is when we meet, obviously, Mickey, and also Teemo. Teemo is played by Steven Yeun. I want to make it clear that I could not understand what his name was the entire time, because everyone says it a little bit differently, so I thought that his name was Steve-O. It's not. It's Teemo. So Teemo kind of grapples himself down. Does that make sense? He lowers himself down into this cave where Mickey is. He kind of takes the flamethrower that Mickey had, and he's like, "You're cool if I just take this, right?" And Mickey's like, yeah, you shouldn't have to take the risk. And Teemo's like, yeah. So he leaves, because Mickey's just going to be reprinted anyway, so, like, does it really matter? This is when we get introduced to the Creepers, okay? The Creepers, for those of you at home, Creepers are basically, imagine a big roly-poly, and then imagine it has the face of a Demogorgon from Stranger Things if it opens its mouth, essentially. I think that's a good comparison. They have, like, baby ones, but what Mickey sees in this cave is this big creeper. It's, like, bigger than a car, okay? It's, like, 2 Cybertrucks, like, on top of each other, probably. Well, maybe like a Cybertruck and a half. Okay. He the creeper, goes over to Mickey, and Mickey's like, this thing's gonna eat me. Okay, now it's exposition time. Let the record show, I'm sitting in the theater watching Mickey 17, and I realize, it's exposition time? I start my timer. So this is when we get, you guessed it, a bunch of exposition. And it's basically Mickey establishing how he got to this place and basically how this world is. So Mickey explains reprinting. He basically says that it's banned on Earth and it's only allowed in space for expendables. We get a little bit of a montage with Mickey 1 through 17, which is what I have written down, but really isn't true at all, because I think we see about maybe 4 variations of Mickey out of 17 before we get back to the present point. Anyways, he kind of proposes the idea of the ethics of human testing and how differently people would be treated if we knew that they could die and come back the next day, essentially. Mickey then kind of suggests that this is his punishment. He says that Mickey 2 was his shortest lifespan, and then he gets into his purpose for becoming an expendable. Why did he do this, you may be wondering? Well, he'll tell you. He essentially tells us that Teemo told him that on Earth, macaroons would be worth more than a hamburger. And so he got a bunch of money, loans and whatever, and opened this macaroon store, which didn't work. And now he's in debt to this man named Darius Blank. One thing you should know about Darius Blank is that he enjoys filming the deaths of the people that are indebted to him. It's kind of established that Darius Blank has enough money to be very comfortable, and so does he want his money? Yes, but it's really not that much of a concern to him. What he likes more is kind of torturing these people that are indebted to him. It kind of gives him a reason to explore that dark fantasy of his, I guess. I don't know. That'll be important later. So this is when Mickey's like, I don't really want to die like that. He's like, there's nothing for me on Earth. I just need to leave so that Darius Blank doesn't get me. So now we kind of cut to this center where everyone is trying to get on this expedition to Niflheim. Mickey kind of mentions that it's like talking to a brick wall when people propose cleaning up Earth rather than escaping it and risking life to find a better planet, essentially. So there's a hint to, some current day climate things. This is when we get introduced to Marshall. He hasn't showed up yet, but we get introduced to Marshall, played by, why do I keep forgetting his name? Mark Ruffalo. Marshall is essentially the guy that is leading these expeditions. It's important to note that other expeditions, aside from this one that Mickey's trying to get on, they're mentioned, but we never get any elaboration on them. They seem rather new because Marshall is so adamant about it, I guess. It seems like a rather new concept. So Mickey applies to be an expendable. He has no skills, so he can't really be anything else. So after very little pushback, he gets hired as an expendable, and enter Trainer Lady. She's not given a name, really nothing special, but Mickey's like, wow, her hair is really familiar. Trainer Lady explains how the cycler works. For those of you at home, just imagine like a trash chute, and at the bottom of it there's a bunch of lava, okay? So this is the cycler. She says it takes basically anything, trash, waste, bodies, and it recycles the raw materials in order to reprint Mickey's. So then they scan his body. She's like, this current body is the one that's going to be reprinted every time. And then they upload his memories, which he establishes as something he has to do every week. When he's uploading his memories this first time, it has to back up a lot of stuff because he is at least like 20 something. I don't think they say his age. And so he's recalling a bunch of stuff. This is when he gets this memory of his mother and him in a car crash. Essentially, he's like, yeah, we were driving and I pressed this red button and that's what crashed the car. So it's like my fault. This is the thing that makes him think that the expendable thing is like a punishment for him pressing the button and like killing his mom. And as much as they tried to like tie this into the film later on, as you'll see, it doesn't really work, but that's a subjective thing. So he's crying because he's haunted by the big red button. The trainer lady comes in and she stands kind of close and it's almost sexual, dare I say. But then she pulls out a gun and then she's like, you need to prove your faith to the system. Show us that you believe our science works. And so he takes the gun and he's like gonna do it, but also he's not gonna do it. He's like shaking and he's very hesitant. So then what happens here is she takes it into her hand and she pulls the trigger. This is important for later on. And it seems like nothing right now, but I really want you to remember this plot point. Turns out it's a blank. There's nothing in the gun. So he's still original Mickey. So now he's officially inexpendable. So now we get more exposition. We establish that there's a calorie regiment. Why did I say it like that? There's a strict calorie regiment, so you can't go over the amount of calories you're supposed to have for that day. Mickey eats a lot of cycler paste, which is shown once in the movie, and essentially think of oatmeal if it was pretty watery and was like this gray sludge, and it tasted like nothing. That's essentially what it is. They don't elaborate on that, but I'm going to do that for your sake. Now enter Kenneth Marshall. This is the first time we see him. He walks in with his wife, Ilfa. They kind of walk in, they have like a big speech thing to say. This is also when we establish Nasha. Yeah, Mickey's like, yeah, I met Nasha on day 1. They kind of like flirt barely before they start having sex. Okay, not in the cafeteria, just in general. And this is when we cut back to Marshall in the cafeteria saying his little speech, and he's like, hey, no more sex. He says it takes too much energy, and that's calories that we don't need to be burning when we're on a strict calorie regimen, which actually makes a lot of sense, but I mean, this plot point really doesn't go anywhere. So this is also when we kind of get to know Marshall's kind of a dumbass. He's kind of insecure, and he kind of overcompensates for that in ways that will become apparent later on. He also establishes to everyone, no more sex, but when we get onto Niflheim and our food production is like going steady, then we will reproduce like crazy, like animals, okay? My next bullet point says, Nasha and Mickey draw and animate sex positions and laugh. I wish this wasn't an important plot point, but somehow it is. Mickey kind of establishes that Nasha stays with him during his worst times, which we'll come back to later in the movie. So Nasha is a soldier and also like firefighter, so she's kind of like, she's an important person on the ship. Oh, you know what I didn't mention earlier? Okay, so I have a count of how many times Mickey is asked, what does it feel like to die? because it happens quite a bit. Enough to the point where you notice it. This is when Mickey establishes that everybody else on the ship is kind of like a dick. So there's this guy in the cafeteria and he's like, Mickey, what does it feel like to die? Like, I mean, like, just because... and he says that word for word. So they end up getting in a fight, Mickey is put in jail, and his rations are split in half. It's important to me that you know that whenever Mickey's rations get split in half, or they decrease on some level, this is only told to us, and it's never shown. He also never shows that he's very hungry, which is something that will come into play later. So now, we're back in the cafeteria. Enter Kai. She comes over and she's like, hey, you can have some of my food. Yours looks gross. And so he does. So now the crew arrives at Niflheim, finally. Niflheim is basically covered in snow and ice. Mickey's like, dang, whoever's going down there is gonna freeze to death. Cut to Mickey down there. He's sent to inhale the virus in the air. If there is one, which they're pretty sure there is, they start testing on him in order to find a vaccine for this virus so everybody else can go down there and breathe normally. This is when we get a montage of Mickey being tested on. This montage makes up most of the deaths that we see of Mickey. And again, there's 17 of Mickeys as far as we know. This montage makes up Mickey 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. So that's 5 deaths that are all in this effort to find a vaccine. If we add on the other deaths we've seen, we saw the first one was from radiation poisoning, which I didn't mention before, but we did see that. And then Mickey 2 was his shortest life, which we do see. So in total, we've seen 7 deaths. Okay? Just want that on the record. So they find the vaccine. Now people don't need masks outside. Great. There's this group that's sent out for some reason. This group consists of Mickey, Kai, Kai's girlfriend Jennifer, and the guy that was being a dick to Mickey in the cafeteria earlier, okay? They go outside, they're like, ugh, like, we hope that we can get crops growing soon. Then they go into a cave, and they're kind of exploring. This is when we find a small baby creeper. She's just running around, and they see this thing, and they're like, let's shoot at it. And so they do. So the creeper runs away. They're, like, about to leave when... Oh, do you guys hear that? Oh, it's a creeper above Jennifer. Okay, so she looks up and she goes, I should probably shoot this thing. And so she does. She points her gun directly above her at this creeper, fires quite a few rounds. This cave collapses in on her. I wonder why. So Jennifer dies. Uh-oh. Oh, man. Sorry. So now we cut back, we're on the ship. Marshall's pissed. He's like, Mickey, why didn't you die? You're the one that's supposed to die. I don't remember what Mickey says to this. It obviously wasn't really important. And his rations are cut again. Marshall also designates these things as creepers, but like whatever. This is also when the sauce plotline starts. Okay, Ilfa, while her husband is just being angry that Mickey didn't die, is like, honey, would you try my sauce? Honey, did you not like my sauce? Again, I wish this wasn't a plot point at all, but it is, okay? More on sauce later. This is when Marshall is kind of like, from now on, you're going to hunt these creepers, and we're gonna figure out what the hell they are. So he's trying to get Mickey to get a sample of these creepers. So he's just going on mission after mission to do this. End of exposition. Exposition time is over. Now, if you remember, I made a point to time how long this portion of the movie is. Exposition ends after 27 minutes and 17 seconds. So just about 30 minutes of the movie is pure setup. No further words, Your Honor. So now we cut back to the beginning. Mickey's in the cave. Remember, he fell and Timo came and didn't retrieve him. And this big creeper comes over and we think he's gonna eat him, but guess what? He doesn't. He, with the other creepers, brings Mickey back to the surface and kind of shoves him back out into the snow. Mickey thinks to himself, they don't think I'm tasty enough. They think my meat has gone bad from all the reprinting. I'm not even good enough to eat. What the heck? Long story short, he hitches a ride on this tractor thing and he ends up getting back to the colony, okay? There's this whole thing about this tractor bringing a huge rock into the colony, and the guy at the gate is like, don't f***ing bring that in here, it's too big, it's gonna f*** up my, like, the gate, like, it's gonna hit the things and I'm gonna have to fix it. Don't bring it in. I'm telling you this now because this conversation goes on for quite a few minutes, and I would prefer it to not. So Mickey jumps off the tractor thing while this conversation is going on. The gate guy comes over and he's like, oh, hey, Mickey. And Mickey's like, is that the time? Is it really 3:30? That doesn't make any sense. Do you know what time I left? This detail has no relevance as far as I'm aware. So Mickey's heading back to his bedroom, and there's an announcement over, like, the comms that's like, Marshall's gonna be holding a dinner with a special guest. Who will it be this time? Oh. So Mickey goes back to his room, and he lays down in bed, and lo and behold, finally, we see Mickey 18 is alive and thriving, okay? Well, I wouldn't say thriving. So one thing I want to establish right off the bat about Mickey 18 is that he's really mean. Mickey 18 is a bitch. He kind of sounds like Robert Pattinson's Batman. The first thing he says to 17 is, why aren't you dead? Okay, it's important to me that you remember this. So 17 is like, fuck, we're multiples, this is not good. 18 is like, yeah, it's not good. I'm gonna kill you now. He throws a weight at 17, and 17 is unconscious now, okay? So now we get another little bit of exposition, okay? This one is about multiples. Like, why are multiples so bad, you might be wondering. This whole thing revolves around this man named Alan Manikova. Alan Manikova is one of the 3 scientists behind the reprinting machine. He's one of the guys that figured out how to replicate a human body. He's also a psychopath, which is pretty sick. I don't know. Well, okay, that was a joke. I kind of said it like it wasn't. The thing about Alan Manikova, and I'll try to keep this kind of brief, he was murdering homeless people, okay? But the thing about Alan is that he had an alibi at the time of the murder, and so the people were like, multiples, obviously. Okay, so he gets put into jail. There's some ethical and logistical questions raised about how this should be handled. Are they accomplices? Is one in charge of the other? Do they get half portions in jail, or do they each get a full serving in jail? While this is all happening, there's another murderer. So there's 3 Alan Manikovas. This is when everyone kind of just generally decides that multiples are bad and that they shouldn't be a thing, and that each soul should only have one body. So then we get Marshall, who proposes that reprinting is a sin, but they could use it to their economic benefit, okay? And he suggests that there will be 1 expendable per planet, and these people are the only people that can reprint themselves, basically. In that, in any case of multiples, that person, mind and body, will be deleted, okay? So now we cut back to present timeline. Mickey 17, through voiceover, kind of explains that all of his past variations have kind of had this, like, outstanding trait. Like, one of them was kind of stupid, and one of them was, like, sweet or something. I don't remember. He basically says there's, like, a more outstanding characteristic, and he's like, none of them have been like an asshole, though, like 18 is. So 18 takes 17 to the cycler to, kill him. 17 has the opportunity to push 18 in, but he doesn't, because 17 is an overall decent human being, right? Then they have a little bit of a fight, and that's fun because you're fighting yourself. And Mickey 17 is like, no, wait, we can split everything. We'll split food, and we'll take turns taking the missions that would kill us, basically. But then Timo shows up, and so the Mickeys hide, because obviously Timo is down there because he's dealing oxy, which is this, like, chemical in flamethrowers, I guess, and people are getting high off that. So he's dealing this. 18 is like, hey, should we kill that guy? It's not funny, sorry. He's like, hey, should we kill that guy? And 17's like, no. 18's like, I'm gonna do it anyways. So he basically throws Timo down the cycler. Timo's, like, holding on for dear life. 17 tackles 18 so he can't, like, finish the job. There's this fight, but Timo doesn't see that there's 2 Mickeys. He's just seeing one Mickey at a time. And long story short, some people come, so 18 ends up saving Timo. Timo doesn't die. 18 then tells Timo, he's like, hey, don't tell anybody about this, because if you do, I'm gonna tell everyone that you're dealing oxy. So Timo's like, okay. So it turns out that the people that were like coming down were Nasha and like her boss. So Nasha's like, what are you doing? You just came out of the machine, like the printer. So like, shouldn't you be resting? And he's like, yeah, no, I should. So they go back to his room. 17 follows, but he's stopped because he's chosen by Marshall for that special dinner that we were talking about earlier. It's important to me that you know that Mickey is stopped by a guy who's sort of in charge of like recording Marshall and like keeping record of the expedition, basically. So he's stopped by that guy who records this whole thing, and another guy who wears a pigeon costume. I wish I could tell you for what reason. And maybe there is like an actual reason, I just don't know. So now we get this really long dinner scene. Essentially, Marshall apologizes for getting mad at Mickey over Jennifer's death, that whole thing, and 17 is just like, yeah, like whatever. He's just happy to have like food. This is when Kai shows up. Remember, Kai was Jennifer's like girlfriend, and Marshall is talking to Kai, and he's like, you know something, Kai, we've been watching you, and you've got good genes. They basically want her to help them reproduce a superior population when they have their sexpedition, right? They say she's basically a great candidate for their birthing project, to which she responds like, hey, so you. No. There's some more sauce talk, like Ilfa's kind of like, oh Kai, like, did you try my sauce? Like, the sauce it's all over your plate and it's good. And it's like, okay, who cares? Literally, who cares? Kai wants them to say a prayer for Jennifer, so they end up doing that, and it turns into this like song of sorts about like the Lord, and that's nice and awkward, and it's like funny until Mickey starts like throwing up. A bunch of doctors just like infiltrate the room, and they kind of start like monitoring him. Turns out there was an experimental growth hormone in the meat that Mickey was eating. This is when we get another mention of this being punishment for Mickey. They test a painkiller on him and it doesn't work. It actually makes it worse. So Marshall goes to put him out of his misery, essentially. But the wife doesn't want blood on the carpet. Like, it's this whole thing. Ugh. Long story short, Mickey is like, no, I'm fine. Kai helps him back to his room, but he's like really not doing too hot, so they just go to her room because it's closer. So he cleans up, she makes this special tea from Earth that's supposed to help like with tummy troubles. Now we get the fourth time, I know I skipped over the third time, but it was there, trust me. The fourth time that Mickey is asked, what does it feel like to die? This is the first time, though, that it actually kind of makes sense in the context of the movie. Kai kind of wants to know what Jennifer felt when she caved herself in. Sorry, it's not funny. Mickey basically explains that he's always scared of dying, and like no matter what, it's always kind of horrible and he hates it, which like is really like a dark answer to her question. She also gets to this like darker mindset, and she's like, yeah, there's this entire universe and Jennifer is nowhere. And then like a few seconds later she's like, are you and Nasha open, and should we kiss right now? And Mickey leaves. So he leaves, he goes back to his room, and he leaves the door cracked open. I want you to know this. This is when we see Nasha and 18 are both in the room, and they are high off their minds on oxy, okay? Nasha's having the time of her life, and they go challengers mode. That's what I wrote on my notes. Then they go challengers mode. I want to also emphasize that 17 is a bit hesitant about this. He keeps like asking 18 like, can you just give us a second? Can you just give us some privacy, please? This is when Kai walks in, and she was bringing Mickey some more tea for his tummy troubles, but she sees them going challengers mode, and she's like, I think I'm gonna leave. So she leaves, Nasha follows her, and they go to talk things through. This is when we have a little bit of a back and forth, so stay with me, okay? With Kai and Nasha, Kai's like, hey, I'm gonna report those guys. They're multiples, that's not allowed. And Nasha's like, no, you aren't. Cut to the Mickeys are like talking, and also the Marshall talk show is on. It's sort of like this late night show with Marshall as the host, and he's screaming about this big rock. Remember that rock that was brought in a while ago, and it was too big and the gate guy didn't want it coming in? Remember that? This rock is now inside the ship, and Marshall's really excited about it. The Mickeys talk about, hey, what happened at dinner? Cut back to Kai is talking with Nasha, and she's like, there are 2 of them. You can have 18 and I'll take 17. So now we cut back. 18 is really mad because he's just heard how 17 could have easily died and they wouldn't have this issue anymore, but he refused to let Marshall kill him, essentially, right? Then we cut back to the girls. Kai is still talking about sharing the Mickeys, and this is when we get something sort of actually insightful during this argument, where Nasha is like, it doesn't matter that there's 2 of them. They're still Mickey, and they're still mine, okay? Cut back to the Mickeys. 18 is still pissed, and he's like, you know what? You're right. This isn't your fault. This is Marshall's fault. And you know what? I'm gonna kill that guy. Then we cut back to the girls, and this is when Kai realizes, hey, Nasha is high on Oxy. This really doesn't matter because it goes nowhere. From this point on, Kai kind of disappears from the movie. So now we cut to Marshall. Marshall is really excited about that rock, remember? He's like, hey, we're gonna split this big rock in half, and we're gonna etch all of our names on it. We're all founders, so all of our names are gonna go on this rock. He also emphasizes this is gonna be the one and only pure colony planet. Okay, so Mickey 18, he shows up, he's gonna shoot Marshall, but just as this happens, a baby creeper jumps out of the rock and attacks Marshall. There's panic, they shut the doors, so there's a bunch of more panic with people trying to catch the creeper so they can use it for like science and other people like trying to escape, obviously. 18 is still trying to kill Marshall. There's a guy that's trying to stop 18 from killing Marshall. Marshall sees 17 and he's like, can you catch the creeper? You don't need a hazmat suit like the other guys do, because we can just reprint you if you catch something. And so Mickey 17 is trying to catch this creeper. There's commotion. Mickey 17 catches the creeper. They put it in like a biohazard bag, but not before 17 tries to communicate with the creeper. They make like a sort of like, I'm not going to try to replicate it. They have like a certain way that they sound. And so Mickey's making those sounds. One of the doctor girls sees this and she's like, okay. So yeah, then he puts it in the bag. 18 gets like a clear shot of Marshall. Nasha tackles him. This is when Marshall sees there's 2 Mickeys. So then there's another smaller creeper that like jump scares everybody. I remember in the theater the lady next to me like audibly like screamed. And they basically blow that thing to bits. Okay, so we have one creeper that is in a biohazard bag. We have another one that is like fully there was no chance. The alive creeper in the bag is like screaming, and we see from the outside that the other creepers heard and are also headed toward the colony. So now we're in jail. 18 is pretty sure that they're gonna die. 17 is talking about the creepers and how they saved him, essentially, but he doesn't say that they saved him. He's more explaining it like, yeah, they didn't want to eat me, and they just like kicked me out of their cave. And Nasha's like, they saved you? Mickey, they saved you. This is when I have a note that just says, dumbass. Because, what do you mean you're just now coming to this realization? And it's not even you, it's somebody else telling you. More on that later. I'll get to that later. I don't even want to talk about the rest of the movie. Like, from this point on, I really don't enjoy. That's a personal opinion. Let's just get on with it. Timo comes. Timo sets up a camera and he's like, hey, Darius Blank has a guy on the inside. They know we're here. He wants us to send him a video of one of us being chopped into exactly 13 pieces. He says this because, like, even if they got the money to pay back their debt, the cost to send the money back to Earth would cost more money, essentially. So basically, Team was like, hey, you're an expendable, let's just chop you up. So there's a little bit of some conversation that happens here before 18 volunteers instead of 17. And he's like, yeah, you know, you could give me some oxy before you chop me up. Like, that'll be a good time. And this is literally where I wrote, long story short, they escape jail, because this part is just so long for like no reason. I don't know how this makes sense, because I wrote they escape jail, but then they're brought to the cycler chamber, and I remember that they're like being escorted there. So I don't remember how both of those things can be true, but somehow they're caught and they're being escorted to the chamber, I guess, for their like execution. I wrote there's another Nasha flashback, because she like cares for Mickey. We get to see more of that. On their way to the cycler, they see there's a bunch of creepers surrounding the ship. Like, there's like a ton. Okay, this is when they just like drop on us as the audience, like, yeah, these guys can break through solid ice and stone. They just tell us that. Okay, Mickey 17, while he's walking, is talking to the science girl that heard him trying to communicate with Creeper earlier, and she's like, yeah, we're analyzing their sounds and we're trying to see if we can find a pattern so we can communicate with them. So then they go to the situation room, which is also the cycler chamber, and they make a point to comment on this and be like, hey, why is this situation room in the cycler chamber? And they go, so that's the reasoning we get for that. So the situation room is basically where Marshall, Ilfa, and some other scientists are discussing what to do about the creeper situation, and also the Mickeys and Nasha are there because they're supposed to be probably getting executed in the cycler, right? So this is when Marshall deletes Mickey's memory brick, so no matter what happens from now on, Mickey can't be reprinted because they don't have his like memories, essentially. Nasha is like heavily defending 18 and his shooting, but Marshall's like, no, like, we're in a war state. I don't know why these notes are back to back, but apparently that's the order that this went in. This is when Nasha makes 2 points. She says, war requires a lot of energy and resources that they don't have right now. So is it really worth it to go into this war state when, 2, we don't even know that the creepers are actually a threat? She also makes a point that the creepers are the native inhabitants of this planet, and that they're like the aliens, essentially, right? This is when 17 is like, yeah, they actually saved me, so really are they a threat? Marshall doesn't give a The science girl, which again, I don't know her name, so she's science girl, she's like, yeah, actually, the creepers are really smart, and we're actually making a translator. We want you, Marshall, to speak with them. This is when Nasha goes off again, and she's kind of like, she's making good points. I don't mean to say it like, ugh, Nasha's talking again, but Marshall's getting like really annoyed with this, and so he takes the alive creeper and he sticks it on this like fishing hook, essentially. They basically have a pulley system where if you let go of the rope, that creeper's gonna fall into the cycler. He makes Nasha bite on the rope because her hands are like in cuffs. Okay, so he makes her bite on the rope in order to keep that creeper alive and not in the cycler. And this also makes it so she can't really talk anymore, which is good for him. Yay. So then we get the police captain. Remember Nasha's boss that I brought up like once earlier? He's talking with another officer, and they start recording Marshall being sort of like abusive and like talking very poorly about the creepers, I guess. This goes nowhere also, okay? Just thought you guys should know this plot point goes nowhere. So this is when Marshall's like, okay, we're just gonna gas all the creepers around the ship. And they plan to film Marshall leading this expedition, and it's gonna be like a hoorah, he did this, how triumphant of him. This is when the wife is like, I have an idea. Wife, Ilfa, who has done nothing but talk of sauce. What do you think she's gonna do, guys? Throw your guesses in the chat. If you guessed she would host a relay race in which the first person to bring back 100 tails so she can make creeper tail sauce, you'd be right. Did that sentence make sense? Yeah. She suggests they put these bombs on both Mickeys, and they send them both out into this rush of creepers, and the first one to bring back 100 tails so Ilfa can make sauce will get to stay alive and the other one gets to blow up. Marshall has a button thing that you might have seen in one of the trailers. One for 17, one for 18. If he presses either of them, that one blows up, okay? They also establish if they go beyond this perimeter, they'll also blow up. There's also, at this point, another mention that this is Mickey's punishment. Every time I mention that there's, like, punishment talk, it's coming from Mickey himself. He's like, oh, I'm being punished. This is my punishment. It's not somebody else saying it. It's Mickey, okay? So now we're kind of in the third act. This goes on for longer than I would like, but we're almost done. As they're about to go out, this is when we kind of touch on that mom plot line again, and 18 is like, you know it was an accident. They said it was a car defect. You pushing the red button, or like us pushing the red button, didn't cause mom to die. And that's the last we hear about that. Science Girl shows up. She gives 17 the translator prototype. Okay, so he should be able to talk with the creepers now. So 17 goes to the big mama creeper, and he's like, you guys are all gonna die. You need to go back home. The mama creeper is like, mind your own business. So she also knows that she is being mama creeper, okay? She knows that they killed baby Luco. Luco, remember the creeper that jumped out of the rock and they blew him to bits? That's Luco. So this is when they're like, okay, so you guys need to give us back the other one, Zolko. This is the baby that's currently in the situation room being like tested on, kind of. And they're like, bring back Zolko. Did you kill him too? And they're like, no. She's like, we're gonna kill you guys all because we can screech really loud and it'll blow up your eyeballs and then your brains and you'll die. So then they all start screeching and that's the thing. Okay, so 17 hears this, or like sees all this happening, and he runs to where this camera is monitoring him. Everyone in the situation room can see both Mickeys, okay? He goes to where the camera can see him and he just starts gesturing. C3. C3. Nasha sees this. Okay, remember she's there. And this is when we get, like, in my opinion, some really dumb payoff. So Nasha sees him going C3, right? Oops. And she's like, so how about you guys guess? What does C3 mean? Your time is up. Remember earlier when I had that note about a plot point that I wish wasn't important, but it was? Where they were drawing sex positions and laughing. One of their sex positions is labeled C3, and they titled it Bring the Baby. So Nasha's like, oh, we need to bring the baby creeper. Stupid. I wrote here that Marshall has FOMO and wants to be recorded talking boss to boss, in that he wants to give the creepers a message before they spray all the gas. Okay. This is also when we cut back to the Mickeys with, like, the creeper. The creeper's also like, bring Zolko back, and also, since you killed Luco, you guys need to kill one of your own. That way we're even. If we get a live baby back, and you guys kill one of your guys, there will be peace. So then, the camera crew heads out with Marshall. There's some more sauce talk from Ilfa. Nasha attacks the wife. She has the wife in a chokehold. Captain, Nasha's boss, basically, he helps Nasha, and so she's able to get the alive baby from the fishhook, and she has to run to get it to the mama creeper because basically they don't have any other transportation for her. So when the creepers see Marshall coming out on this like big, I guess I'll call it a tank. It's not really a tank, but just imagine that sort of like bumpy ride, I guess. I don't know. Imagine he's like standing on top of a tank and there's like a flat surface on top of the tank so you could like stand on it. Imagine if a tour bus was a tank. So the creepers see this and they're like, okay, big brain mode. So they start swarming like into different piles of swarms that are equally the same in size, I guess. That was a dumb way to say that, but that way they can't tell which one is the big mama creeper. 18, he goes off on his own because he wants to go kill Marshall. 17 gets the baby from Nasha. They return it. So that's cool. Now they just have to kill one of their own, right? So 18 goes to kill Marshall. Marshall's like trying to press the buttons, but like 18 keeps him from doing that. And when he goes to like press his own button, because hey, that's how he can kill Marshall, he hesitates. And this is when Marshall's like, you're also afraid. of dying, right? That's like a cool little like moment, but then 18 just like presses the button anyways, and so there's this big explosion. Marshall dies, 18 also dies, okay? So then there's a time jump. We're 6 months after this occurrence, okay? Nasha's part of the committee now. She's abolishing the Expendables program. Kai has a new girlfriend. Who cares? Human printing is abolished. They're gonna blow up the printer in this like ceremony thing on Niflheim, okay? Mickey explains that Ilfa, after Marshall got blown up, she went into shock and she tried to kill in the psych ward. We also learned that Timo got jumped by Darius Blank's associate. Remember that whole thing? And he ended up killing that guy, but he got off on self-defense, so he's not like a murderer. He's fine. The science girl, she makes like an official translator for the creepers. Mickey talks to Mama Creeper and asks if they really would have gotten blown up by their screeching, and the answer is no, they were bluffing, okay? So that's fun. Then we get this interesting scene. This is a dream, okay? Mickey's at the cycler, essentially. He's just throwing trash out, and he goes upstairs to see the printer, where Ilfa is there, okay? And she is printing out a new version of Marshall. There's also some sauce on the floor. Like, I genuinely can't. There's sauce on the floor, and Ilfa's like, taste it. So he is like about to taste it, and she's like, you know what? Taste it, don't taste it. I don't care. Like, she goes on this rant that I really could care less about if you couldn't tell. Or wait, could not care less about. Whatever. This is when Mickey's like, wait, Ilfa? I just remembered something. You're dead. And so now we're thinking, is Ilfa also a copy? And this is a point where I was actually like, wait, shit could get crazy. But then it doesn't, and it was just a dream. So, yeah. So now we're back to the present. They're having this like ceremony thing about abolishing the Expendables program, right? And so Mickey blows up the printer, and he kind of ends on this note where he has to stop feeling guilty about things in his past and that it's okay for him to be happy. Which I don't know if that was the point of all this. I really don't know if that was the point of all this, but, you know, sure. Yeah, sure. So that's Mickey 17. I would like to say, I don't think I painted it in the best light. So if you're interested in any extent, even after this, I urge you to go watch the movie and think for yourself about it. I clearly feel some sort of way toward the movie, but that doesn't mean that you'll feel the same. Please go see the movie, wait for it to come out on streaming or something, and then watch it and come to your own conclusions. The biggest reason I have so many gripes with this movie is because I've been comparing it to the book this whole time, so I'm very curious how people who don't have that other story to go off of perceive and take Mickey 17. One other thing that I would like to say about the movie before we get to like general stuff, I timed whenever Mickey 18 was in a scene, not just when he was on screen, just if he was part of a scene. There are some longer scenes in which he's involved in, and that's when I kind of cut a little, because especially near the end in like the Situation Room, there's a lot going on and Mickey 18 isn't really a big part of it sometimes. So in the time that I timed, Mickey 18 has about 30 minutes of screen time. This is an overestimate of his screen time, because again, I was recording time that he was just in a scene, not necessarily on screen. All I want to say is, you would think that for a movie that revolves around the idea of multiples, maybe he'd be on screen just a little bit more. Now that that's over, let's talk Mickey 17 subjectively, I guess. I am a user of Letterboxd. I rated this movie 3 stars on Letterboxd. From an objective standpoint, not comparing it to the book, it's still a subjective opinion, but like taking only the movie into account, I thought that the pacing was kind of slow. I felt a lot of scenes were dragged on, especially when it gets to the end with the whole creeper war situation. I found myself, especially on the second watch, thinking like, hey, this is taking like kind of a while and I'm like ready for it to be over. The bulk of my thoughts will come out when we get to the comparison section of this video. So for now, let's just talk about a general consensus of this movie. From my friends that I have seen on Letterboxd rate this movie, it can go both ways. I haven't seen it largely skewed to like or dislike, and this seems to be the case online as well. I've seen a lot of people on Letterboxd really enjoy this movie. A lot of people don't. Right now the average rating is 3.7 stars on Letterboxd. On Rotten Tomatoes, Mickey 17 is in the 70s for both critical and audience reviews. So it's well received in general. So I thought it would be fun if I found a good Letterboxd review for this movie that could kind of like summarize a general opinion on this movie, and that's when I realized like that wouldn't really work. And so instead of that, I've found a review from every rating that you could give on Letterboxd, and I'm gonna read those for you now. So at 5 stars we have, I'm impressed with how much I understood this movie, considering, as I must shamefully admit, I'd never seen Mickey's 1 through 16. The amount of people that I've seen make this joke is honestly concerning. Someone rated this 4.5 stars and said, "I'd f my clone for sure." Alright, that's great that you admitted that on the public internet. Someone at 4 stars reviewed this with just Mark Ruffalo's veneers. and that's a great review. More of those, please. Someone rated this 3.5 stars and said, "Started well, but by the end it felt like a lecture," which is kind of where I stand. At 3 stars we have, "Why did Robert Pattinson sound like Steve Buscemi to me?" 2.5 stars we have, "Crazy they didn't really say anything about anything the whole time." 2 stars we have, "Is this not Star Wars: The Clone Wars?" It's honestly a better joke than the first one. So someone rated this 1.5 stars. They also they hearted the movie, and then they said, "It made me laugh a lot. I would watch it again." So, would you? Okay. And this is my personal favorite. Someone rated this 0.5 stars. They rated it a half star, and their review was, "Ass 17 in Mickey ass." So... Okay, so after this, I kind of cut my losses with Letterboxd, and I went onto the other website I know people love to share their opinions on, Reddit. And I wanted to see, like, if there was a more solid opinion on whether the movie was good or bad, but again, it differed. Like, there are some threads where majority of people hate the movie, and vice versa, right? But I did find this one comment from the thread where people didn't really like the movie that much. This person hasn't seen the movie yet, but they said, "I know they've changed the number of Mickeys from 7 to 17, but I hope they haven't changed much else from the book. While it doesn't have that much of a third act climax, it's a satisfying story that lets Mickey use his brains rather than turn into an action hero." Shall we talk about the book? Mickey 7 is a novel written by Edward Ashton. It was published in... When was this published? This was published in 2022. The book has a rating of 3.78 on Goodreads, so it essentially has like around the same rating as the movie does currently. Something important to note about Mickey 7 is the way in which it's written. Mickey 7 is written in the first person point of view, so this entire time Mickey is narrating to us. This is why he narrates in the movie as well, if you were wondering. The only other thing that you really need to know is that the story is not told chronologically. Mickey alternates between the present timeline and the past, so he'll often, within a chapter or chapter by chapter, switch between if he's talking about what's presently going on, or if he's talking about something that happened to a past variation of himself, or something that happened on a different colony, which I'll explain and that'll make sense in just a few short moments. So we'll be bouncing back and forth a lot, so just keep that in mind. So for this, I'll be going chapter by chapter. Hopefully we can get through this in a timely manner. Chapter 1, we start with the very same opening that's in the movie, which is pretty sick. He's in this cave, he has fallen, but right off the bat, we have a major plot point that is not in the movie. I'll try to keep my comparisons for later, but as we go along, you'll see there are several things that are missed opportunities, I'll say, for the director and just the movie in general. This is one of them. Mickey basically immediately describes that even though he fell from a great height and it's cold as hell and he's still alive, he has a really bad pain in his left wrist. Okay? It's at least a sprain, he says. This is when we get another crucial bit of the book, which is Mickey's comm. Think of it as a phone, but like, it's not a phone. So he can get calls, texts, whatever. So he gets a text, and on screen his name is Mickey7. Okay? That's his like username, we'll call it. So he's texting with Berto. Berto is Timo. Okay? Are we all on the same page? Great. So they're texting back and forth. Berto decides that Mickey isn't worth the risk, so he's going to leave him. And this is when Mickey reveals to us, the reader, that he hasn't uploaded his memories in a month. This is when Mickey gets a text from Nasha, and she offers to save him, but Mickey's like, no, you don't worry about it, because he doesn't want Nasha to risk her life for him. He would be fine with Berto doing it, but Nasha's too important. So he's like, no, leave me, I'll be fine. So she doesn't go and get him either. So he gets up, he starts walking around. While he's walking around, he runs into this mama creeper. So this is the big creeper that we see in the movie, right? He describes her as bigger than the rest. He says that she has brown or black fur, where normal creepers have white fur, which he thinks that they evolved to blend in with like the winter snow, essentially. And the same thing happens. He thinks he's gonna get eaten, but he's actually dragged by the mama creeper and she saves him, okay? It's important to me that you know that he knows that the creepers just saved him, okay? Thanks. So now we get a little bit of his colony established. He says that on the perimeter of the colony there are sensor towers, which are basically automated burner turrets. Burners in this world are essentially guns, okay? He says it's really interesting that we have these big weapons because creepers are the only thing that we've seen here. They're kind of pointless because creepers can move under the snow without triggering the sensors. So what's really the point of them? You know what I mean? So that will be important for later, by the way. So he gets back to the gate, he just walks back, and this is where we meet Gabe, okay? Gabe is like the security guard, and he's like, hey, did you see... He's like, hey, did you see anything cool out there? And he goes, no. So this is when he goes back to his room. He notices the door is unlocked, and so he comes in, he closes the door, and he sees someone in his bed. And he just goes, hey. Mickey 8 wakes up, and he says, and I quote, what the crap? I'm Mickey 8, aren't I? I'll just say this. Let's look at the first lines of Mickey 18 versus Mickey 8. Mickey 18, why aren't you dead? Mickey 8, crap, I'm Mickey 8, aren't I? I hope you can sense where this will be going. Chapter 2. This chapter is basically exposition. This is like our exposition chapter for Mickey and one of the reasons that he became an expendable. So, he also volunteered in the book. This is like a common thread between both the movie and the book. In the book, his interviewer Gwen is reading out some examples of what he'll have to do as an expendable, and the list is so long that he just zones out. But he decides that he has to be an expendable because he has no other skills. This is also when we establish that Mickey is a historian, or would have been a historian if machines didn't give people the capabilities to just look up anything whenever they wanted. He's a big fan of history, which is why we get a lot of recounts of other failed colonies in the past, but Mickey's like, there's not really a need for historians, again, because technology can do everything for other people. He doesn't really have a purpose in life. So now let's talk about Midgard. So now you're thinking, what the hell is Midgard? And let me tell you something. Midgard is where Mickey is from. In the book, Earth was like a while ago. And also, they've cut Earth off, basically, for reasons that they explain, but I don't want to know because it'll take too long. The reason that Midgard is important is because Midgard is essentially a perfect planet and society as well. He describes Midgard and he says, a third generation colony in the Goldilocks zone. There's no native species that they really had to worry about when they were like colonizing it. There's no actual axial tilt, so that means that there's no seasons. Essentially, it's warm at the equator, it's cold at the poles, and other than that, you don't really have to worry about like weather. He says population isn't an issue, they have good beaches, it's clean, the government sticks to the economy and it doesn't really invade people's personal lives or decisions. And he says, and I quote, "Almost nobody on Midgard had money problems. It's essentially a perfect society," as I said, right? So now you're like, why would he want to leave then? His issue with Midgard is that he's basically useless as an academic for the reasons I stated earlier, right? And even though he had like a stipend to like live comfortably, he couldn't really figure out what it was all for. And then we get this banger quote. "And so, like bored young men throughout history, I spent an unfortunate amount of time finding ways to get myself into trouble." So now we go to chapter 3, okay? This chapter starts with Mickey 7 and 8 having a civil conversation, and I have that highlighted here. Civil conversation. This is also when we establish the calorie regimen that also exists in the book. When they first got on the ship, they had a 1,400 kilocalorie ration, but it's been cut back twice since then, since it's been hard for them to grow plants. So now about their conversation, okay? They suggest, should we take it to Marshall? Because, I mean, this was a mistake after all. They go, no, he's going to kill us both. He hates multiples. They basically decide 7 is going to clean up in the room while 8 gets all the printer gunk off of him in the chemical shower, because when you come out of the printer, you're like covered in like goop and junk. And they'll meet at the cycler in 30 minutes, okay? Mickey 7 is taking a nap while he's waiting for 8, okay? And Berto comes into the room. 7 is pretending to be 8 because Berto doesn't know that he didn't die, right? And he's like, hey, what happened to 7? And Berto goes, he was swarmed by creepers. And 7 is like, because obviously 7 knows. No, he wasn't. Berto left long before he even like stood up. And the creepers weren't even there at that point, right? He's kind of suspicious. And he's like, why is Berto not telling me the truth? It's also important to note that 7 keeps his left hand under the blanket this entire time because he's hiding his sprained wrist, right? Because a newly printed Mickey wouldn't have a sprained wrist. Berto notices this, but he makes a joke about it. Great. This is when we establish that Mickey died 6 times in the last 8 years. So he really doesn't die that often, is the point there. So now 7 is going to the cycler and he's having this thought that 8 definitely is not a continuation of me. Honestly, he doesn't seem to even like me very much. So now they're at the cycler. This is something I would like to point out. The cycler in the book is described as a black disc that emits fiery flashes when consuming matter. So instead of lava, like in the movie, it's just black disc. And when they see dust particles like hit the disc, it's like tss, tss, like it's just a cool visual. So now they have to decide who's gonna jump in, right? Here's something that I so badly wish we could have gotten in the movie, and I genuinely don't know why they didn't go this route. I have a lot to say. I have a lot to say. In order to decide who is dying, they do rock, paper, scissors. This is fun for multiple reasons. It's a very serious matter, and they're like, nah, we'll throw hands for it. Okay, right? It's also fun because this is the same person. So essentially he's overthinking because he's playing himself. So he's like, I'm thinking this way, so he's thinking that way. So I have to do something else. And by the time that he throws his hand down, he hasn't done anything and he puts down rock. 8 puts down paper. So 7 is going down the cycler. Chapter 4. This is when we get a chapter about Berto, basically. And it's actually a pretty good chapter. Berto is essentially the source of all of Mickey's problems, is how he describes it. He also says that, in a sense, Berto is the opposite of Mickey because he has plenty of skills. He says he excels at everything, okay? Page 42. The thing you have to understand about Berto is that he was one of those obnoxious kids who was prodigy level good at nearly everything he ever tried. So essentially we get some backstory where Berto is really good at this one sport, so he enters a competition for it, and Mickey bets against him, and he keeps doubling down with money he doesn't have, and so now he's in debt to Darius Blank, whatever. Berto feels bad that Mickey bet all that stuff on him and that he's in debt now, so he's trying to get him on the expedition where he's been hired as like a pilot, Berto, right? This doesn't work because Mickey is not qualified. When Mickey gets back to his apartment, he's attacked with a neural inducer, which basically taps into all his pain centers. He describes it as like the most painful experience you could ever comprehend, and then he's like, and then multiply that by 10. And that's how it felt. So he's like, I gotta get out of here. He looks at the crew list for the expedition, and the only slot that isn't full, expendable. Chapter 5. Chapter 5 has a great opening. Let me share it with you. I don't get shoved into the cycler at this time. I'm explaining this now because you look nervous. He cares for us readers. It's really sweet, really. So yeah, he's about to go headfirst into the cycler, but like he says, he doesn't. This is because 8 saves him. Okay? Oh my gosh. So he puts a hand on his shoulder and Mickey 7 is like, oh, he's gonna like shove me face first in. So he's like, give me a minute. And 8 goes, no, this isn't right. I can't just stand here and watch you do this. Are you actually serious? Yeah, I am actually serious. So this is when they come up with their plan. Essentially, they're deciding that they're going to split calories. If they only eat cycler paste, then they'll be fine, right? They can split calories and, like, not get discovered as long as they don't tell anybody. The 2 people that are brought up in conversation are Marshall and Nasha. They bring up Marshall because they're like, if we tell him about this, maybe we can get a higher calorie regimen and we don't have to basically starve ourselves. But this is debunked, like, relatively quick. Because Marshall, we find out, knows about Darius Blank and Mickey's debt to him, so he already thinks Mickey's like a criminal, and on top of that, he doesn't like multiples, so that's like a no-go. They also decide not to bring it up to Nasha because they don't want her to be complicit in their like crime, essentially. So then we cut to 7, he goes to the cafeteria, 8 goes back to the room. 7 is eating with Nasha, and she's like, I feel bad I didn't save you, and he's like, it's whatever. And Berto shows up, and he's like, hey, what's with your hand? Okay, Mickey's hand is now wrapped with bandages, and there's some purple on the edges, okay, like bruising. He's like, oh, I fell out of bed. And Nasha was like, well, your hand was fine when I saw you earlier in the shower. And Mickey's like, no, it was after that. Berto goes, there's something off about you this time. So Berto's like suspicious, okay? Then he's like, hey, did you guys hear? Gabe died. Remember Gabe? He was at the gate. This is when we also establish through conversation, Mickey says that burners, again, like guns, don't work on creepers, and everyone kind of looks at him like, the hell? Because they all kind of like have come to rely on burners. I don't know. This is when Mickey gets summoned through his comm to go to Marshall's office, okay? Then we see a conversation between 7 and 8 through the text comm. They're both labeled as Mickey 8 now, because that is the version of Mickey that's alive. 8 asks if 7 can do it, and 7's like, sure. So 7 goes off to Marshall's office. Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is all about Marshall. Mickey describes Marshall as someone who thought of himself as in charge of things. And he says he was almost a parody of the sort of cold-eyed, combat-hardened military man that Midgard hadn't ever actually had or needed. It took me 3 years and 2 reincarnations to realize that his whole aspect was 10% genuine priggishness, 10% insecurity, and 80% overcompensation for the fact that, as designated ground commander, he may as well have been cargo for the entirety of the transit. He and Marshall have sort of this conversation in front of everybody where Marshall is saying that nobody can bring personal items on the ship because if everybody brings personal items, then the weight will increase and they won't be able to accelerate at a proper speed because physics. I don't know. This is also when we establish natalists, okay? Natalists are described as a cult, but they're also not a cult, they're a religion, okay? This religion believes in the sanctity of the unitary soul, which basically means that if you print out another body of a person, the soul doesn't come with it, so it's just this soulless monster, and it's not human, okay? So that's Marshall's headspace. This is why he doesn't like Mickey from the get-go, along with the fact that he's a criminal, and the idea of multiples is, like, astonishing to Marshall, okay? So that's Marshall. Chapter 7. 7 gets to Marshall's office. Berto is also there. Marshall is pissed. Okay, take a shot every time I say pissed, because it's about to get crazy. So he's really annoyed that Berto didn't retrieve Mickey's corpse. He's mad about this because when you reprint a body, you need to use a lot of, like, protein and, like, resources, and if you think about it, you take the corpse, put it down the cycler, and you print out a new body, it's kind of canceling that out. But because they didn't have a body, because Berto didn't retrieve it, they're just using the material that they already have, and they're taking that away in order to print a new Mickey, okay? Marshall's pissed about this. He reduces both of their calorie rations by 20%. When they leave Marshall's office, 7 and Berto argue a little bit, okay? This is when we hear from Mickey how annoyed he is at Berto because he relies on him for information after like constantly dying. Berto's kind of like, I don't understand why you're so angry. Mickey is like, every so often I wake up in my bed hungover and covered in goo, and I realize that something horrible just happened to me, and I don't have any memory of what it was or why it happened or what I could possibly do to prevent it from happening again. And when that happens, I trust you and Nasha to fill me in, to tell me what happened. I have to trust you because I have no way to remember this stuff for myself. And now I know for a certain fact that you have lied to me about what happened at least once, and that leads me to wonder how many other times you've lied to me. Can you understand that? Friendship issues. Great. Mickey goes back to his room. He sees 8 is in bed, and he has his left hand wrapped, and he goes, what the hell happened to you? And he goes, okay, dumbass. Nothing happened to me. I have to look like you if we're gonna, like, not get caught. So this is when they make a plan for their shifts and how they're gonna split them up. They decide that 7 will take the next suicide mission because he is technically supposed to be dead if 8 is alive, and that if it's just a hazardous mission and there's not, like, a 100% chance of death, then they'll throw hands for it. Mickey 7 tells 8 about how they got their calories reduced and that Berto is suspicious of them. This is when he gets another text from Command that he's needed in the main lock. And 7 goes instead of 8 because 8 is like, I just got out of the tank, you go. I need to rest. So he does. Now we have Chapter 8. Chapter 8 is one of my favorite chapters in the book. So Mickey kind of establishes that he'll kind of do whatever if he's not needed for, like, his own job. He just helps around the colony. But when Command needs him, it's because he actually has to do his actual job. Now we get to his training arc. So we establish Gemma. Gemma is Mickey's trainer. He says that she's funny, kind, and weirdly thoughtful. We kind of get a better insight into why expendables are needed when Gemma is explaining the antimatter containment unit basics. Mickey's kind of like, why do I need to know this? Like, if all the engineers are dead, then, like, I'm, like, a horrible hope. Like, you guys should not rely on me for this. And she's like, no, it's fine. The engineers will be there to help, but it's better if you just know the basics. Mickey kind of brings up the idea of why can't drones just do all of this kind of stuff? She says, drones are subject to damage from high energy particles just like you are. In fact, you'd be surprised how much longer a human will last in a stream of heavy particles than a mechanical. You may be dead for all practical purposes after 60 seconds out there, but it'll take your body an hour or more to figure that out, and you can be doing useful work that entire time. A drone in that environment will shut down in under a minute, and they're also a lot more difficult to replace than you. Okay? Mickey also establishes that Gemma and him did not just talk about expendable junk, and they actually had insightful conversations. This is when he first brings up the ship of Theseus. To summarize the ship of Theseus, it's sort of this, like, hypothetical, I guess. Imagine Theseus has a ship, and he goes sailing, and on his journeys, one slat of the board, like, gets, like, fucked up, so he needs to replace it. So he replaces it with a new one, and he keeps going on his journey, right? By the time he gets back home, one by one, all of the boards have been replaced. Is it the same ship, or is it a new ship? He's kind of like, no, like, it's the same ship. But she's like, okay, so what if he crashed his boat, and he got a new ship of Theseus? Is that the same ship? And it was, like, identical. It's the same thing. And he's like, no, that's a new ship, then. That's not the same ship, that's a new ship. She goes, okay, that's really interesting, because that's actually a perfect analogy to describe you. Would you say that you're a completely different person? Or is it the same? Because what's the difference if you replace it one at a time, or you replace the entire thing all at once? And so now he's kind of thinking about himself in this new way, okay? This is another point that I wish that they would have brought up in the movie at least once, but they didn't, so here we are. This is when we get his physical backup and his also personality backup. That didn't make sense, but you get the point. Within this personality backup, with all the memories stuff, he mentions that he sees his mom, but there's no mention of a crash or anything of that, and it's never brought up again. Cool. So then we get to that final test that was in the movie where Gemma hands Mickey a gun, the burner, and she's like, it's your final exam, prove to us that you believe in the process, essentially. The only difference in this scene from the book versus the movie is that he actually does it. Remember how in the movie he was, like, really hesitant and he was really scared, so the trainer girl did it? In the book, he actually does it. It's still a blank, so he's still the original Mickey, and she's like, congratulations, you're officially Mickey number 1. Chapter 9. So Mickey gets called to the main lock, remember that? So he's there now, and he sees that there's a big hole in the decking, and there's also a man-shaped blob in the corner. Everybody is like, it's creepers. That has to be creepers. Which is crazy because if you think about it, decking is like, it's metal. Like, so a creeper had to like come up and like and take that metal away. So this is when Marshall's like, okay, I'm sending a bunch of people on this like snipe mission. You guys are gonna go find those things and bring us back a sample. So Mickey is like prepping, he's gearing up with a bunch of these like soldier guys, and he tells one of the guys, hey, you shouldn't wear armor because it's too heavy, and you want to be on top of the snow, you don't want to be like in armor. And the guy's like, hey, not all of us are gonna be reprinted at the end of the day. I'm gonna wear the armor. Mickey also brings an accelerator, which I don't really know how to describe it, but it's different than a burner. This is important because everybody else brings burners, right? So now, this is when we get our first of many stories that Mickey tells about another colony. It does tie into the mission at hand, but not enough for me to explain it to you right now. So if you're curious about like other colonies, there's a bunch of excerpts of that in the book. I would strongly urge you to buy the book and read it, just in general, but especially if you want to know more about those. Now we meet Kat Chen. Kat Chen is Kai, okay? She's talking to Mickey about his weapon choice, because again, it's different than what everybody else is carrying. He's like, yeah, well, I decided to take an accelerator because every time I've been attacked by creepers and ended up dying, I had a burner with me and it didn't work. So I decided that I'll try something else this time, even though I'm not really sure if it will actually work. So that's what he does. While they're talking about this, creepers attack Dugan, I think is his name. Dugan is the guy that was like, I'm gonna wear the armor even though you told me not to. So he's getting attacked. Everybody else is trying to shoot the creeper off of Dugan's leg, which isn't working. So creepers end up getting them too. Mickey and Kat run to this rock. They see a creeper kind of below them, so Mickey shoots it with the accelerator and it works. So they now have this like creeper sample, and Berto comes over. He's like flying in a thing. He drops like a ladder or something. So they get out of the way, and when they look down, the rock is like swarmed with creepers now. So out of like the 5 people on this mission, Mickey and Kat are the only ones that survived. Chapter 10. This is when Mickey describes his first death, his first couple deaths actually. He's explaining that there was a hole in the nose cone of the ship, and so he was tasked with replacing the power coupling unit and bringing back the old one if he was still alive to do so. And he succeeds, but he dies while his body's burning from the inside out. Cool. This is when Mickey 2 pops up. He's basically immediately sent to finish the task that Mickey 1 started, because even though he replaced the unit, there's still a huge hole in the ship. So he's sent to go, like, fix that. So he does this again, but again, he's, like, burning from the inside out. And so on his way back, he's, like, suffering. Next thing we know, Mickey 3 is popped out of the tank, and they show him a video of him as Mickey 2 completing the mission, and he sees that when he was on his way back to the airlock, Mickey 2 popped his helmet. Okay, chapter 11. Berto, Kat, and Mickey 7 are on their way back to the colony. They're in the aircraft, right? Berto's like, cool, that went great. Kat is actually pissed because she's like, you should have warned us that we were standing on a nest. 3 people died. 3 people that I know died. This includes her roommate, which is established later, I think. But yeah, so her roommate just died in that, like, thing. She's like, yeah, you should have warned us that we were standing on a swarm. And he was like, I would if I could, because remember, creepers can move under the snow without triggering sensors. So he actually didn't know. They meet with Marshall. Marshall, again, pissed because 3 people died and none of them were Mickey. In this discussion, Marshall says a few things. He says, 1, he thinks Mickey knows a bit more about the creepers than he's letting on, but he has like more concerning issues, so he doesn't like press him for it, okay? The other thing he says is that he thinks that Kat and Mickey are sleeping together, and he doesn't have a problem with that. He has an issue with, basically, he implies that her hormones got in the way of a successful mission, not sacrificing Mickey to the creepers instead of the other people, even though she's literally like, there's not really a way that we could have saved them. Then we cut to Mickey and Kat are eating in the cafeteria. Mickey eats a little bit more than his half of the ration, right? Because him and Mickey are supposed to be splitting it, but he eats a little over, which leaves less for 8. Also, we're on page 129, by the way. Okay, so we're like nearing halfway through this book. Is the first time Mickey is asked what it feels like to die. This is asked by Kat, who is like wondering what it feels like to be reprinted, essentially. Mickey doesn't really have a good answer, so I just skipped over that. Nasha shows up. There's some weird tension, and Nasha's like, do you want him? And Kat's like, no. And Nasha's like, good. Alright, cool. Back in Mickey's room. 7 and 8 are having a nice creeper conversation. They're talking about like why would the creepers want to steal metal? Why would they steal the decking? And I've noted this conversation goes mostly nowhere. This is when we get this bit. Now that I think about it, this is probably where the dream sequence in the movie comes in. But it's so different. I haven't thought about this before. Sorry. So Mickey 7 is discussing a reoccurring dream that he's having, which is one of the reasons he hasn't been uploading, because he thinks it's like a glitch from being reprinted so many times and he doesn't want to like keep it going. Does that make sense? So the dream is basically on Midgard. He's talking to this giant caterpillar in the woods, and the caterpillar's like smoking, and he's like saying a bunch of stuff, but Mickey can't understand what he's saying. Then it always cuts to Mickey 2 crawling back to the airlock and popping his helmet, and everything getting vacuumed from his body. Cool. Chapter 12. So this chapter starts with 7 talking about how Mickey 3 was alive for the longest out of all the Mickeys, and that he actually got bored waiting for death. So he started reading about failed colonies. This is when we get another one of those stories. But more importantly, he talks about when he met Nasha. Unlike the movie, he meets Nasha when he's Mickey 3. I genuinely cannot tell if I'm in, like, focus or not. I feel like I'm not. I feel like I haven't been in focus for a long time. This is gonna be really bad. I can't see anything. This entire thing is gonna turn into a podcast if the whole thing is blurry. Okay. So he describes meeting Nasha. He meets Nasha when he's Mickey 3 in the carousel, which is essentially like, I don't think this is right, but in my head it's a giant like hamster wheel that they use to work out in. And they call it the carousel. I don't think that's right at all, but it's fun to think about. They basically immediately start having sex, but like their relationship does go deeper than just that. It's also important to me that, you know, Mickey kind of says that he has had sex with a lot of people on the ship, so the whole sex plotline in the movie, just, I don't really know where that came from. They also say that when they landed, Niflheim was like a snowball, and they didn't realize that it was going to be all icy, and that's that, I guess. Chapter 13. Mickey 7, he can't sleep, so he goes to the cafeteria. This is when he gets a ping from HR to go on perimeter patrol. So he's texting Mickey 8, they're trying to decide who's gonna do perimeter patrol. This is when Kat texts him, and she's like, hey, do you want to pair up? We're both on perimeter patrol. And 8 is like, see, now you have to go because I don't have a relationship with her. You do. I have not really talked with her. So they end up pairing up on perimeter patrol. Long story short, there's another creeper attack. Mickey ends up unconscious, and when he comes to, Kat is like, yeah, that shit was crazy. There was a big giant creeper, and I like shot at it. And 7 is like, uh-oh, because obviously he knows that thing saved him. Mickey goes back to his room. I don't know where 8 is. I didn't make note of it, but he's not there. They get invited to dinner by Berto. He's like, it's on me. And both Mickeys are like, yes, please, because remember, they've basically been starving this whole time. So if Berto's going to give them food, like whatever they want to hop on that. There's a bit of an argument between 7 and 8 through text. This is when the tensions between them start to get a little bit more... Does that make sense? It's not so peaceful between the two of them anymore, basically. Mickey 8 is like, I just want real food. Like, I just came out of the cycler. Mickey 7 is like, pissed because he's like, no, like, I've been doing all the work since you came out of the tank. I almost died twice. You've literally just been napping this entire time. So 8 is like, okay, you know what? You're right. Fine. I cannot wait until you get eaten. Chapter 14. Berto treats Mickey to some real food in the cafeteria. He has a ration of 3,000 calories. Now, if you remember, Berto has had his calories reduced a little bit from some earlier occurrence in the book. So you might be wondering, how does he have so many calories to spend? Essentially, think about if you had like a big rock formation and there was like a slit in like the middle, like a vertical slit, okay? And it's like pretty narrow. And you have Berto in like a ship, okay? He is collecting bets. He's like, guys, I could fly through that thing. He essentially does. He like zooms and he like turns the ship so that it's like it fits through. He's got a bunch of people that have given their calories because they like lost this bet, right? This pisses Mickey off because he's like, wow, you would risk your life for more food, but you wouldn't risk your life for your friend. So then we have this guy, Darren, in the cafeteria. He's pissed because he lost calories to this bet. They get in a fight with Berto. Somehow Mickey ends up in this fight. He gets tased and knocked out. We're back to Marshall. We're back in Marshall's office, okay? Marshall is really pissed that Berto would pull a stunt like that. The whole, okay? He's really annoyed because he's like, we barely have any resources and you're gonna risk your life and that ship for what? So he punishes him with like a few different things, and then he's also like, and you, Mickey, your calorie rations are going down by 10%. And Mickey's like, what? Okay, chapter 15. We're a little over like halfway through the book. Mickey 8 is pissed because their calories have gone down again, and they're splitting it between two people. So, if you're wondering, they are now down to 720 calories each. When Mickey 18 first came out of the tube, they'd agreed to split it, and they were both getting 1,250 calories each. So then, they both get a text from Nasha, and she's like, do you guys want to hang out? Or sorry, do you, just one of you, do you want to hang out? And Mickey A is like, yes. And Mickey 7 is kind of upset because he's like, really, you're gonna like have sex with Nasha like right now? Mickey A is like, I just want food, dumbass. Like, I'm gonna try to get her to feed me food. You need to leave. So Mickey 7 leaves. He goes down to the cafeteria because there's not much else to do on the ship. And this is when he realizes, you know, if 8 is gonna try to get Nasha to feed him, where would they go, do you think? The cafeteria. So he leaves and he goes to the gym. He's starting to get paranoid. It's only been like a day or two maybe, and he's already getting like more and more paranoid every time he passes by somebody. He gets to the gym and Kat is there. They briefly talk about her roommate. She was one of the deaths on the mission, remember that? She's kind of like, hey, why are you here? Because he gets in there and she's like working out and he's just there to like read. And he's like, oh, I wanted some privacy. And she's like, why didn't you just go to your room if you wanted privacy? He's like, Nasha's in there with someone else. And she's like, in your room? And he's like, I don't know. Kat is like, well, my roommate is like gone, so you can crash at mine, okay? Chapter 16. Kat wakes 7 up and they're both on her side of the bed. They push the beds together and Kat was sleeping on her side, but Mickey ended up on her side because he didn't feel comfortable sleeping in a dead person's bed, which like makes sense. This is when Mickey tells us, the reader, he's like, I want to be clear, nothing sexual happened. So they go to eat. There's a long conversation between the two of them. They talk about making plans later, okay? He goes back to bed. This is when he establishes that like he's supposed to be on like agriculture duty, like taking care of plants, and when he gets back to his room, 8 isn't there, so he assumes that he's taking care of the plant thing. He's like, of course when there's a dangerous mission I have to do it, but when it's taking care of plants, of course 8 will go and take that. 8 gets back from his job. They catch up about Kat because 8 says he ran into her on his way back from the ag section. He also says that Kat noticed his wrist looked great, and this is when we see Mickey 8 wasn't wearing the wrist wrap, okay? So chapter 17, I start this note off by saying, great chapter, in all caps. This is going to be a longer chapter, so just be prepared. I'm going to explain a lot, okay? Chapter 17 is about Alan Manikova, and the reason that this chapter is so long is because Alan Manikova's entire story is so much more complex than in the movie. And this is something that I will rant about later. If there's one plot point that I could select to be an example of oversimplifying something for an adaptation, it would be this, okay? To understand the visceral reaction that most citizens have to the idea of multiples, you have to understand Alan Manikova, and you have to have at least a passing familiarity with what he did to Galt. Mickey starts this by saying that the bioprinter was invented long before expendables were actually a thing, and they actually weren't that interesting until Manakova came along. Manakova, he is basically the sole heir of a wealthy political dynasty on the planet Eden. He's also a genius. He got a doctorate in 3 unrelated fields before he turned 25. He's also a sociopath, okay? Mickey says that after Manakova turned 25, both of his parents died. The police tried to prove that he did it, and they failed, so he really didn't have anything to do with those deaths. Getting ahead of myself. And when his parents died, he became one of 10 of the wealthiest people in the Union. So not just on the planet, but like in the Union. He put all of his money, like literally all of it, into a group called Universal Eternity Inc. And he hired a bunch of engineers and a bunch of scientists, and nothing happened for 5 years. After 5 years, he went on a talk show and he announced that he found the secret to recording and replicating the human mind. He demonstrated this by duplicating his head of HR, and after that, his stocks went way up and he became easily the wealthiest person in the Union, okay? He says instead of settling down, he basically liquidated all of his assets, and he single-handedly caused a planetary economic recession and went into orbit. He got on a ship, got a bunch of materials, a bunch of supplies, and went into orbit. He didn't tell anyone where he was going, but they know that he brought a bunch of supplies, right, and his replication unit, the bioprinter. It turns out he was going to a recently established colony called Galt. Okay. Galt was different than other colonies because instead of being government founded, it was privately founded. Everyone on Galt are people. That didn't make sense. Everyone who lived on Galt is a person. I don't think that made sense either. Everyone there believes in self-reliance, which essentially is every man for himself. Nobody does anything for the common good. Okay. When Manakova arrived, there were about 20 families, around 10,000 people in total, okay? Manakova settled in with a smaller clan, and he set to reproducing himself. This is when Mickey kind of emphasizes how much materials are needed to reprint a human body and what's needed for it. So he says that you need a lot of calcium and a lot of protein, in that even though you can get that stuff from a bunch of raw materials, the ideal source for that is a pre-existing human body. Mickey says after 9 months, Manakova went through all the feedstock, all the livestock that he had brought with him. At this point, he had about 100 copies of himself, and those copies had made 2 more replication units, so now there's 3 bioprinters. A few months after that is when people started noticing people were going missing. This is when they sent security forces to question him politely, is how Mickey puts it. What they didn't know was that Manakova, along with the livestock, supplies, and the bioprinter, also brought advanced weaponry, essentially. So even though in Galt he was outnumbered still 20-1, they stood no chance, okay? So he starts murdering people and shoving them into the cycler to print out more bodies. This goes on for a year until people are okay, this is a big issue and we need help. Which is crazy. At this point, Manakova is the majority of the population on Galt. The final clan families, everyone that's left, they know that they're doomed, but they're the one thing that we can do is send a message for help. So they send a message back to Eden about what's happening. This message took 7 years to reach Eden. After it got there, it took 2 years for them to decide what to do. And after that 2 years, they were you know what? He'll probably actually be an issue in the future, so we should probably actually do something about this. This is when they launched the only military expedition that is in the history that Mickey knows of, okay? This is their plan. They're going to send out a ship. They've named it Eden's Justice, okay? This ship has about 200 crew members and a bunch, a ton of fusion bombs, okay? They're going to settle into Galt's orbit. They're going to contact Manakova and determine what his intentions are, and then, if it's, not great, they'll glass the planet over. There are 3 flaws with this plan, Mickey says. He says, 1, by the time that they get to Galt, Manakova will have had 18 years to establish his presence and prepare for any, counterattack, essentially. 2, when a ship settles into orbit, it has to decelerate, right? Because it's traveling at an insane speed. When a ship decelerates, it has this deceleration light that turns on, and there's no way to hide it. So that deceleration light can be seen from 1 light year out. Basically, Manakova would have been able to see them coming and have a light year to prepare. The third issue, Mickey says, is that Manakova was not the type to wait for a fight to come to him, okay? Now it's getting interesting. The Battle of Galt lasted 12 seconds, he says. The ship Eden's Justice was blown to bits by a dozen nuclear missiles from Manakova. So now it's like, uh-oh. The good news is that Galt's warning message didn't just reach Eden, it also reached the neighboring planet Farholm, and they were a lot more scared about this issue, okay? So this is their plan. They're gonna send the bullet. So if you guys didn't know, Mickey gives us this equation. Kinetic energy equals the mass of an object times its volume squared, I think. Velocity? No, it's times velocity, I think. Yeah, because mass times volume doesn't make sense. This is all to say that the bullet was going super fast. Because the downfall of Eden's Justice was he could see the deceleration light, they never attempted to decelerate, okay? Because the bullet didn't attempt to decelerate, there was no way to defend from its attack, because the light waves that the bullet would have emitted would only reach the target like a fraction of a second before it actually hit. He describes this explosion as 200,000 fusion bombs going off at the same time in a picosecond. Okay. That's crazy. He says that this is one of the greatest crimes in the history of the Union, and then he says, nobody blames Farholm for it, though. They blame Manakova, and ever since, in most parts of the Union, you're better off in most people's minds as being a child stealer or a human head collector than you are being a multiple. Chapter 18. Back to the present. Remember when Kat was like, hey, we should hang out later? That's what's happening, okay? So she texts Seven, and she's like, meet me in the gym in 10 minutes, okay? So he's halfway to the gym when he gets a text, and this is what it says. It's from Mickey 8, apparently, but it says this. He's kind of confused. He gets 2 more texts that look like this and this. He's like, what the f*** is 8 doing? Whatever. It doesn't matter. So he gets to the gym, and Kat is like, hey, Mickey, so I know that there are 2 of you. She says that Mickey 8's healed hand gave it away, and she's not going to report him even though she doesn't agree with what he's doing, okay? Then they talk more about the ship of Theseus and, like, if Mickey is still the original Mickey and stuff like that. Cool. Mickey 7 goes back to his room. He finds 8 with Nasha. They're both naked, okay? He closes the door. They argue because Mickey 7 is like, hey, I thought we said we weren't going to bring Nasha into things. She's like, no, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to turn you in. Then they talk about how Kat knows. He's like, yeah, well, also Kat's into us. Not into us, onto us. She's not even onto us, like, she knows. This is when 7 is like, I'm not sure how much longer we can go if it's only been a couple days and 2 people already know. So this is when they go challengers mode. That is a constant in both the book and the movie. I will say, however, that in the book, 7 is a lot more into it than 17 was, okay? He says, the next 2 hours are weird. I don't think I want to talk about them. Just to be clear, though, I regret nothing. Mickey 7, you're so funny. When they're all done, they're just, like, sleeping. There's a knock at the door. It's Kat. She sees what's happening, and she's like... and then immediately, like, leaves. Nobody goes to follow her because they're like... she already said she wouldn't tell on us, so it's fine. Like, she already knew what's the worst that could happen. Basically, right after this, they wake up to more knocks, and it's security, and they're like, you guys are gonna go to the cycler. So, chapter 19 is a chapter that I don't have a lot of notes on. It's basically just them going to the cycler, and 7 is having flashbacks to when he was being tested on and died 3 times in 2 weeks. This is Mickey 3, 4, and 5, and that's basically that chapter. It's essentially the same stuff that was happening in the movie when he was getting tested on for the vaccine. That's all described in this chapter, but since we already went over that in the movie, I'm not going to go over it again. Chapter 20. So the 3 are not taken to the cycler. They're taken to the security room, which is interesting because immediately after that, the Mickeys are taken, Nasha's left there, and the Mickeys are taken to a storage closet. This is when we get really good writing, okay? He doesn't take us to the cycler. He takes us 4 doors down the corridor and sticks us in another room about the size of a storage closet. "What's this?" I ask. He shrugs. "A storage closet." If you're not into reading, get back into reading. It's really fun. Mickey 7 is starting to sleep when another weird text comes in. It looks like this. Mickey 7 looks up, but Mickey 8 is asleep. And so he's like, ugh, he's texting me while he's sleeping. Dumbass. 7 is then taken to Marshall, who basically says that the Mickeys will for sure be put into the cycler. But he has more concerning matters. He says the only things up in the air are 2 things. He says, 1, should we reprint you and make Mickey 9, even though 7 and 8 are for sure dying, should we go through the trouble of making a 9th one? And 2, should Nasha die even though we kind of need her because we're like on the verge of war with creepers? This is when Mickey's like, what? We're on the verge of war with creepers? He's like, yeah. Yeah, we are. Then he goes back to jail, okay? Not the storage closet, like an actual jail. After a while, they talk more about the ship of Theseus. It's a recurring thing if you can't tell. This is a big theme, whether or not Mickey 7 is like the original Mickey still. Then Mickey 7 is taken to Marshall again, okay? And Marshall wants to know about the creepers, so Mickey 7 tells him everything he knows. Chapter 21. Mickey 7 is thinking about Mickey 6. We don't know what happened to Mickey 6 because we're not sure if Berto is lying about what happened to 6, right? Remember that? Cool. He's thinking about this when he gets 3 more texts from Mickey 8. Finally, he confronts 8 about it, and he's like, why are you sending me these texts? And 8 is like, I'm not doing it. I thought you were doing it. And 7's like, I'm not doing it. I thought you were doing it. But they have no time to discuss this more because now they're actually being taken to the cycler. So, Marshall gives them 2 options. He says, okay, so both of you can die. So first, both of you can die, and your personality will be wiped from the servers. You will no longer exist in any sense, and Cat will become our expendable. Or you can complete a mission I have for you. Chapter 22. We get this explanation of antimatter. Essentially, our universe is made of normal matter, and if you bring antimatter into it, it's like, no go, it's really bad. But they're like, no, it's really great for war in space, so that's cool. It's a lot more detailed in the book. I don't have time, okay? I don't have time. He also discusses the bubble bomb. Again, this is explained in more detail in the book. All you need to know is that it uses antimatter. Again, antimatter in normal matter space is like not good, and he says it's essentially a nightmare that's worse than like nuclear bombs. Cool. Then he says bubble bombs, just like multiples, are banned. The Union hates bubble bombs. Chapter 23. Berto's back. He's dropping the Mickeys in the place where 7 was supposed to die. So that like cave that he fell into, Berto's taking them back there. This is when 7 asks Berto what happened to 6. And Berto explains to him that the creepers took 6 and that he thinks they were tearing him apart to see how he worked. Okay, so now 7 is like, oh, the creepers have my comm. They have Mickey 6's comm, and they're the ones texting me. He kind of puts that together, okay? 7 and 8 are dropped in the cave. They both have a mini bubble bomb strapped to their backs, okay? Or not strapped to their backs, it's just like in their bag, I guess. Their mission from Marshall is to find the creepers and blow them to bits, essentially. The way that bubble bombs work is essentially you kind of just like let them go and they kind of float, and when they pop, the antimatter reacts with the normal matter and it's like catastrophic, right? And because they're floating before they pop, it can cover like a really wide range. And so this is like the plan that Marshall has, okay? 8 basically suggests that they split up for maximum coverage, but to keep the voice comm on so they can hear each other. So that's what they do. 7 is exploring. He gets to this cavern that's full of tens of thousands of creepers. 8 is like, are you seeing this? And 7 is like, yeah. And then he goes to say something else. But 8 doesn't answer. This is when 7 understands that 8 is dead. So we don't see 8's death like we see it in the movie. We just know that he's dead, that the creepers like got him. 7 goes to pull his cord that will release the bubble bomb, but he hesitates. This is when he gets a text that says basically understand. And there's the big creeper in front of him. Through the text, the creeper's like, are you the prime Mickey? And he's like, yeah, I'm the prime Mickey. And the creeper's like, I'm also the prime. let's talk. And so they do. Chapter 24, I have I have no notes for chapter 24. I don't know if you can see. It's essentially like another reflective chapter about how another colony treated the original inhabitants of the planet, and Mickey basically is just like, it just takes time. So that's that. Whoa, sorry, excuse me. That tasted like SpaghettiOs, and I don't know why, because I haven't eaten SpaghettiOs in over a year. So chapter 25. So Mickey 7 exits the Creeper's home alive. He starts walking back to his colony, but when he gets to a certain point, those big, like, burner turrets, remember those, like, gun towers? They are all, like, activated, and they're all pointed toward him. He has his hand on the bomb cord, so it's too risky for them to actually shoot him because his hand could slip and set off the bubble bomb and destroy everyone in the colony. He's smart. He's a smart guy. So he demands that Marshall comes out to talk with him. And so an hour later, Marshall comes out to talk to him. Mickey 7 basically tells him, actually, from now on, I'm just going to refer to him as Mickey because there's only one of him now. Mickey tells Marshall that the Creepers killed 8 before he triggered his bomb, so both bombs are still intact. He then says the Creepers have 8's bomb, in that they not only know what it is, but they know how to use it because he told them. Marshall's like, why would you tell them that? He's like, I didn't want them to take it apart to see how it worked because they easily could have done that underneath our colony and it would have killed all of us anyways. So really, I'm doing all of us a favor. They basically decide that they can't kill Mickey anymore because he's the only one, like, on good terms with the Creepers. This is when he has another dream about the caterpillar. This time he can understand the caterpillar. The caterpillar asks him, is this an ending or a beginning? And he says, I hope it's both. Chapter 26. Marshall calls Mickey into his office and he's like, hey, I got a mission for you. We need that antimatter back, so you need to go and retrieve the bubble bomb. And Mickey's like, no. So actually, no, I'm not going to do that. You had a plan for the colony to survive without that antimatter when you sent us out there with it, so we'll be fine. I'm not going to go do that. And hey, also, I'm resigning as an expendable. I don't want to do that anymore. He also says that, like, you have to accept my resignation, otherwise I'm going to go back to the Creepers and tell them that the deal's off and they're free to use the bubble bomb. So that's that. In the cafeteria, Berto is like, hey, are we good? Mickey punches him in the eye, and then he's like, yeah, we're good. Chapter 27, this is the last chapter. It's spring on, what is this planet called? Niflheim. Mickey takes Nasha on a little hike, and he shows her where he has hidden Mickey 8's bomb. So the bomb's actually not with the Creepers, and it's actually just hidden. He says that he got it back from the Creepers by just asking for it politely, and they gave it to him. Cool. In that he's hiding it here because it's the only thing keeping both the Creepers and Mickey alive. That's his leverage, right? And he plans to keep it there until Marshall dies, and then when he dies, then he will just bring it back to the colony and be like, oh, the Creepers returned it. And that's kind of how it ends. It's like, it's peaceful, and they just, like, walk back to the colony. That's the end of Mickey 7. Obviously, those are very different. I hope that now you can kind of understand why I didn't want to go in, like, a linear fashion. The execution of all the, like, beats is just very different. I will say, too, before we start, like, the comparison thing, that, like, I don't think Mickey 7 is a perfect book. I have my, like, gripes with it as well, so it's not just, like, me being like, Mickey 7 is the perfect book, and I don't understand why 17 didn't just copy it, like, verbatim. The ending, I think, is very anticlimactic, and a lot of the plot points seem to kind of, like, not get brought up last minute, but, like, they're kind of just, like, thrown in there. So I wanted to get that in there, that way it was, like, so you guys know I'm not just being like, the book is perfect and the movie is horrible, because that's not the case. So we're gonna compare and contrast the two. I want to go over some of the beats that are different in the book and the movie, not necessarily different inherently, but different in their execution. And I'll kind of go from, like, the things that I care least about to the things that I wish genuinely would have been thought about more and debated more before they decided on just, like, going one way in the movie. So let's talk about expendable training. In the movie, there's this plot point that gets strung along very loosely regarding Mickey's memory of his mom and the car accident that he thinks he caused, as well as this like recurring idea of him being punished for that through the expendable stuff. I just don't think that the plot point is tight enough for that to have any impact, especially when we don't meet his mom or know her in any sense other than that was just his mom. Another thing about expendable training is that during the final exam in the movie, the trainer pulls the trigger, whereas in the book, Mickey actually does it, and I think that speaks like volumes about the difference in his character, which I will get to the difference in Mickey as a character at the end of this section, because that's a huge difference in my opinion. In the movie, the girl pulling the trigger just does nothing for me. Like, her whole point with that final exam was for him to prove that he believes in this system, because that's his only option if he wants to have a purpose and achieve what he wants from escaping, like, Earth, right? But he doesn't do it. She does it. So then what was even the point? In the book, with him doing it, it proves that even though he's afraid, like, he's still committed to this role that he's taken on because it's the only thing that he really has. And that kind of sets his character development up. By the end of the book, he has this new perspective on his role in the colony. He doesn't want to die anymore, like he's okay with at the beginning. It's just, I don't know, character growth? Anyways, next we're going to talk about Darius Blank, I don't know, that guy. In the movie, he takes up like a whole subplot, especially with Berto, or like Timo in the movie, and in my opinion it kind of ends up going nowhere. It's kind of just used as a way to make things a bit more interesting and also incorporate Timo's character a bit more, when really it has no greater impact on anything, and it also provides Timo with no character development. He starts as kind of this selfish guy that gets away with anything and ends as this selfish guy that gets away with anything. So I don't really know what the point of that was. In the book, Darius Blank just kind of acts as reasoning for Mickey to escape. And I personally kind of like that, just because it doesn't set up this subplot that goes nowhere. Let's talk about the Creepers for a second. It's a solid subplot in both of the movies, in both versions of Mickey. In both variations, it does seem a bit off to me. It kind of seems like an afterthought of a climax. I don't really know what else to say about it. Also, I will say this. The whole thing about in the movie with them screeching and being able to blow people up, but like that being a bluff, that kind of pissed me off. I'll get to that later though, because I have a lot of thoughts on the ending. Next, let's talk about Ilfa. Ilfa is not a character in the book, as you might have noticed. And frankly, I don't know why she's a character in the movie. To me, her only purpose in the movie is to provide this like recurring theme of sauce, which we'll talk about later. We'll talk about the sauce later. But as of right now, I hate Ilfa. I don't know why she's a character. I don't think she does anything worthy. She does nothing of note. I don't think the movie would have been any different without her. And frankly, it would have been better if we would have, if the only difference in Mickey 17 and Mickey 17 Emery's version was that we got rid of Ilfa and we got rid of all the sauce plot points. Guess what? We have 2 minutes less content to watch. God, I hate Ilfa. Comment down below if you hate Ilfa. Let's talk about Berto / Timo. Berto in the book, he has a solid subplot. When I was rereading it, I kind of caught that. I guess the first time I read the book, I didn't really catch on to that subplot, but I actually think it's a really good inclusion and plotline. It goes into trust, selfishness, friendship, stuff like that. Good themes all around. I do think they could have spent maybe a bit more time on it, but for what it is, I think it's a really good addition to the book. You also get some sort of character development with Berto, kind of getting what's coming, I guess, with him getting punched by Mickey. In the movie, Timo, like I mentioned before, just doesn't really have any character development, and he's kind of just the whole time. And it kind of plays into that, comedic relief, I guess. He kind of is just this comical character, and I don't think we're supposed to necessarily like him, but I wish that they would have explored his plotline a bit more. regardless, let's talk about the ship of Theseus. As talked about earlier, the ship of Theseus metaphor is brought up like constantly in the book, and it gives the reader this constant thought process of whether or not Mickey is still Mickey or if he's somebody different. This is something that's not explored really in the movie. It is like once when Nasha is arguing with Kai and she's like, Mickey 17 or 18, it's still Mickey. Do you remember that? Do you guys remember that? It's been hours. And it would have been so easy for them to just like bring it up just once. That way we could have like thought about that after the movie, but like, you know what? Replace all the sauce talk with Ship of Theseus talk, and then I'll be on board. It's that easy. We only have important stuff left, so let's talk about those mysterious texts from Mickey 8 that ended up being the Creepers who had Mickey 6's comm, right? This, again, not in the movie. I think it's a really good plot line. I do think in the book it could have been explored more. It kind of comes in at like the last like 50 pages, so it's kind of late in the story, but I still think if it could have been explored and brought in a bit earlier, then that would have been a great plot line. And I think that would have been a great way to showcase the Creepers' intelligence without them faking a death screech and being able to like lie. I think that them picking apart this piece of like human technology, figuring out how to use it by eavesdropping on Mickey's current texts with himself, is a lot more intelligent than being able to deceive somebody. Now let's talk about Mickey's wrist. Right off the bat, as I said on page 2 of the book, Mickey's wrist is established as like hurting. Who the hell? Someone's moving a whole barbecue grill. Oh, but they have a cute dog, so it's okay. Mickey's injured wrist does numbers for the plot in the book. It sets up this complication for both Mickeys who have to look the same, and when they don't, when one isn't wearing his wrist bandage, that leads to them being found out, which inevitably leads to them getting reported. It adds tension, it adds stakes, it also adds more multiple time, I guess, which is a huge complaint that I have in the movie. As I stated before, Mickey 18 only has like less than a half hour of screen time. Even though Mickey 8 doesn't take up like a huge portion of this book, he's still like ever present, it seems. Even if he's not like even texting, there's still that like thing in the air of like, oh, he better be like behaving himself, he better be like, hopefully he's wearing the wrist bandage because otherwise we're screwed. There's still that thing hanging over your head. That's something that's not in the movie. Genuinely don't know why they wouldn't include that. It's a really easy plot point to include, but I think they had some other things on their mind, which we'll get to. We're going to talk about the ending overall before we get to our last point. The ending is completely different if you couldn't tell. It's similar in the sense that they're going to try to eliminate all of the creepers, but obviously the execution is done really differently. They're gonna gas them in the movie. The Mickeys are sent on a task to collect tail sauce. There's a translator. There's like all this different stuff, right? There's the screeching. There's Marshall getting blown up with 18, which is very different than in the book where the two of them split up in the cave. We actually don't really see the climax heart-to-heart talk that both of the primes have, which is one of my complaints with the book. There is that similar theme of like deception by the end of the movie in the book, where in the movie it turns out the creepers were lying about like their screeching, and at the end of the book Mickey is lying about the creepers having the bomb. Isn't that so interesting that even when I just say a simple sentence like that, I feel it's very clear which plot point is more interesting? Anyways, I think in the movie has the exact opposite issue of the book, where the book doesn't even dive into the, like, this climactic event where Mickey 7 is talking to the leader of the creepers. The opposite effect happens in the movie Mickey 17, where I feel the climax goes on for a little bit too long. Maybe it's just because the build-up in the rest of the movie has been so slow that I just was wishing the movie was over, but I think objectively it just goes on for like a while, and especially with a character like Marshall and Ilfa, who are not really interesting enough to want more screen time for. I do think obviously the movie has its merits because it obviously is more action packed because the book gives us literally nothing. And so the climax of the movie does have a lot of that stuff you see in the trailer, which all of that was like exciting, right? It's definitely climactic. I just think it goes on for like a little bit too long, but who's to say? Lastly, this last comparison point I want to talk about is Mickey 8 versus Mickey 18. I think it's very clear in the movie, Mickey 18 is essentially a polar opposite of Mickey 17. I personally think they do this so that we as the audience don't confuse the Mickeys, but I think that's kind of a missed opportunity. I would have had a lot of fun trying to figure out which was the original Mickey versus which one wasn't, but that's just a personal preference. I know movies are trying to appeal to a wider audience, but you know, I don't think people are as stupid as production companies think. In the book, Mickey 8 is more similar to 7 than he is different. They definitely have opposing viewpoints sometimes, and he definitely gets annoying to the point where you kind of are mad at him in the book because he's constantly avoiding doing dangerous work, even though their agreement was to split those tasks. But he is more like Mickey 7, which lends itself to some fun banter, some fun back and forth. Again, we get civil conversations between the two of them. We get fun moments where they are settling their issues with, again, like rock, paper, scissors to decide who's gonna die. I think that the movie missed out on that opportunity as well to play with the idea of very similar characters. It's kind of like twin characters. One of the reasons, for example, that Fred and George in Harry Potter are so fun is because we can't tell which one is which, but regardless, the banter that we get from them and the way that their minds are so similar in how they think and how they react to things, that's a lot of fun. I think we could have gotten that from the Mickeys. It just seemed really like a missed opportunity. I personally don't like how Mickey 18 is so drastically different than 17. It makes him very unlikable. I get also that they're trying to showcase how people have different parts of them and they're not entirely good or not entirely bad, and I think that's the point they were trying to make by being like, look, this is the same person, but you clearly don't like Mickey 18 because he's a right? But really, he's the same guy as Mickey 17, who we all generally like. People are not inherently good or inherently bad. Everyone is a multifaceted person, and that's cool and all, but also, why can't he be more fun? Oh my gosh, did I skip over Manakova when I was talking about... Oh my gosh, I think I did. One of the other points that I was obviously very annoyed with when I saw Mickey 17 was how they handled Manakova. I think it's very obvious which plot point is more interesting if you look at Manakova's story in the movie versus Manakova's story in the book. It's so much better in the book. The only reason why I think the simplification of Manakova's plotline is valid is because I do think it would take a good chunk of time for them to explain how it happened in the book. I think they didn't think it was, like, important enough to keep that plot point the same. That being said, they could have done it in a more interesting way. I think there's the movie version where Manakova kills homeless people and that's basically it, and then you have the book version where he kills tens of thousands of people on this planet and the entire population consists of him, and he causes the only military expedition in the history of the Union, and then not only murders that military expedition but basically causes one of the other greatest crimes in the history of the Union, which ends with Galt, the entire planet, being blown to bits. There are two sides of the spectrum. There's gotta be something in the middle of those two things. This is a good transition to get us onto the last portion of this video, which is the purpose and goal of both the movie and the film. What point are they trying to make, respectively, and does that point get across? And if so, was that point worth the changes that were made? That's more for like the movie, but you get the point. Let's talk about Mickey 7 first, because I have less to say about that. Mickey 7 is a bit more balanced in its plot lines, so there's no singular message being like shoved down your throat, I'll say. You get a lot of different themes through the different subplots. There's themes of morality, originality, ethics, colonization, friendship, as well as like the complexity of the human, I guess. I've decided to turn off my light because I think it's making me really orange. So if this looks horrible now, I don't care. The video's almost over. I think at the end of the day, Mickey 7's goal in terms of theming was to focus more on originality. I don't think the ship of Theseus would have been brought up as many times or at all if this wasn't one of the primary like goals of the book. I also think Edward Ashton wanted to talk about colonization because there are so many instances in the book where Mickey recalls a failed colony or a successful colony and why it failed or succeeded. There are a lot of different things that he touches on in that realm. I know I didn't really go into it in this video because it wasn't super relevant to Mickey's actual like present plot, but it's like ever present in the book. It's like constantly being like taught to you through Mickey. Mickey 17 has a very clear goal. Anyone who watches this film can immediately clock who Marshall is a caricature of. Caricature. How do you say that word?
Caricature.
It was so loud. Anyways, Mickey 17 is so heavily political that it's not even funny, and I mean that in a literal sense. Marshall is supposed to be this caricature of someone we all unfortunately know more than we would like. You have his wife and their similar way of thinking that they want this pure colony and they want to murder the original inhabitants of this planet because they pose a threat. I think one of the things that this video essay doesn't convey very well is how much space Marshall takes up in the movie. If I were to time how much time Marshall had on screen, I am almost certain that it would be more time than Mickey 18 had. Which is crazy considering Mickey 18 should be one of the main characters in this movie. Now, it's totally fine to call attention to the current state of the world, and he does this on several levels, the director. He kind of calls out like the climate crisis as well as, you know, who's in charge of our country. All of that is cool, but the issue is they're sort of preaching to a choir. All of the things that they bring up and sort of make fun of with their like satirical writing and performance, it's kind of just them being like, look how silly these people are. Look at how corrupt their minds are that they would think this way. So anyways, and that's kind of it. And I think that's where the analysis really comes in, because you think about it and you're like, well, is there anything they could have said that would have, you know, changed the way that we view things, or changed maybe someone who aligns with Marshall's viewpoints somehow? What could they say that could alter their perspective and get them to, you know, think differently? And I think the answer to that is largely no. And so that's probably why they chose not to say anything at all. But that results in this like forced message where we're constantly kind of hearing about Marshall, and we're seeing this like caricature of a political leader. All of this ends, I feel is important to mention, with Marshall being exploded along with 18. So what does that say about our current society? You know what I mean? In Mickey 17, we end on this nice note at the cost of the previous leader dying. And how did they do that? Not of natural causes. That's for sure. So now what lesson are we getting in our head? What's the takeaway from that? Do you see what I'm getting at? I think that's the main issue with the ending of that plotline specifically in the movie. Aside from like that political message, the movie does have some other themes that revolve around ethics, morality, colonization especially, as well as class. There's a lot of stuff about class, which is why now we're going to talk about the sauce. I didn't get anything out of the sauce, if you couldn't tell from my reactions to it earlier. I had to look up what was the deal with this sauce, right? I found several sources, none of which were reliable. And this seems to be the general consensus about the sauce. The sauce is supposed to sort of represent how people in the upper class have little to no regard for the people around them and are so focused on their own endeavors and what everybody else thinks of them. Did that even make sense? I wrote that down as a note, and I don't think it even conveys the meaning properly. Ilfa is obsessed with sauce, right? She's constantly asking other people to try her sauce, and she wants new, creature tales to make sauce, and she's very hyper-fixated on this thing, right? She's so obsessed with this sauce. Meanwhile, everyone else is on, a strict calorie regiment. They're not even concerned with things like sauce. Ilfa is so not concerned with these crew problems. She is with the commander Marshall. They are obviously of a higher class. They wear fancy clothes while everybody else is in these dreary basic uniforms. And she's concerned with sauce, something nobody else brings up ever, and for good reason, because nobody cares. If, let's say that we do care for a second, her bringing up sauce constantly emphasizes how the higher class people have no concern for realistic problems and are so obsessed with these things that they think matters, but really has no impact to other people. Also, that was another thing that I didn't bring up during the comparison section. The calorie regimen, I feel it's done a lot better in the book, because it's mentioned in the movie a few times, but we never see the impact that it has on Mickey, whereas in the book it's a bit more present and adds some complications throughout the story, but we don't have time, we're past that, whatever. So before this ends, I want to talk about why changing things so drastically doesn't always work. When you're adapting the source material into a show or a movie or whatever, it can be really tricky. I think specifically with Mickey 17, the issue stems from pushing themes. The thing about sci-fi, as well as fantasy, I know this is sci-fi, but those genres are basically inherently political. I don't think I've ever read a sci-fi book or fantasy book that didn't have something to do with the political state of the world and the way the world works because of some leader in charge. I don't think I can think of a single sci-fi or fantasy book that I read that doesn't include a war of some sort. Actually, that's not true. Well, no, yeah, there's always a war at least mentioned. Try reading one sci-fi book, one fantasy book that doesn't have the word war in there. Guess what? You'll have nothing to read. I think the issue with Mickey 17 specifically is that they thought maybe with the source material it didn't focus enough on those themes, or maybe they just wanted to create something that really spoke to those themes, but I think that they just ended up overdoing it. I think the changes that they made took away from the interesting part of the story, which was having multiples, and it shifted focus to push the agenda that they had, which was speaking on a certain topic. And like I said, it didn't really work because they didn't really have anything to say about it. They just wanted to call attention to it. So then it's what was the point? It's like if you had a truck and you were trying to transport this trailer of horses, right? So you're gonna hook up that trailer of horses to your truck. If everything is attached correctly, you will get to your destination and those horses will get there too, right? You're not losing the horses. They'll be there the whole time. And even though they're in the back and they're attached to the back and you're not there with them, they're still there. And guess what? You're in the truck. And guess what? The truck has cool tunes and it's got butt heaters. And it's got AC. The point is, the truck slaps. You want to be in the truck because that's where the fun is. You go to your destination, you're having fun in the truck, and guess what? the horses were there the whole time. And you're aware the horses are there the whole time, but it's not like taking over your mind. You don't complete your mission unless you acknowledge that you got the horses there. That was the whole point of this in the first place. The point isn't about the truck, it's about getting the horses there. Does this make sense? Okay. Now imagine that you have to drive these horses in the trailer to your destination, but you attach the horses to the front of your truck instead of the back. Okay? So now, if you're thinking about the trailer that I'm thinking about, you have this big trailer in front of you, and you cannot see where you're going. Not only this, the trailer is built in a way that it only has wheels on the back side, right? So the trailer wheels are in the very front, and when you try to go forward, you have to really navigate correctly. That way, the trailer goes the way you want it to go instead of just like going to the side. Assuming that you're a good driver, you get to your destination with the horses, right? But guess what? All of the fun of the truck, it's gone. It doesn't matter that you have butt heaters, and it doesn't matter that you have Bluetooth, because guess what? None of that matters because you're so focused on navigating this freaking trailer, you can't see anything because all you can see are horses. All you can see are horses in a trailer. So eventually you get to your destination, and you can't appreciate the journey that you've had. You've had no fun because guess what? You've been staring at a horse trailer the whole time. Do you get what I'm putting out there? You don't need to focus on your themes for them to get across. If you do everything right, if you hook up that trailer right from the beginning, those themes will be with you the entire ride. When you get to your destination and you open that trailer and you see those horses run free, you'll be like, wow, those are some beautiful horses. But when you get there and you've been with this trailer in front of you this whole time and you open up that trailer, you don't give a about the horses. You go, finally, the horses are there. We can finally move on with our lives. So on that note, that's all I have to say. Oh, I forgot to talk about the trailers. Basically, my point about the trailers was that they really paint out the movie to be a certain way, to be this really cool sci-fi action movie with like bombs and, the weird space creatures, you got advanced technology and this like forbidden like thing about multiples, and the movie is not that. So basically my point about that was that it's a misleading trailer. Sometimes misleading trailers are good, but this time it wasn't. Now that that's out of my mouth, I don't think I have anything else to say. I think this was a good lesson on adaptations and thinking about the message that you want to portray and ensuring that it doesn't get lost in the sauce. That's not what I wanted to say at all. I won't let this go on for any longer because this is already way too long, but hopefully it was engaging in some sort of way. Let me know if it was, and I'm sorry if it wasn't. Leave your comments about what you thought of the movie, or about certain things that I touched on. If you agree or if you disagree, I'd be very intrigued. But don't be mean. Please. Other than that, have a good day, I guess. That's it.